All right, everybody. Thank you for joining today. I really appreciate it. So today we get to talk about growing and cooking summer style. And so there's definitely a lot of interest. A lot of people have been, emailing me about this, and, just we have some time at home. And so Ann and I thought maybe hopefully we could help and just kind of give you some ideas on growing and then cooking, what you can do this summer then. So today we have, I'm the one talking on the left there. My name is Andrea Nicolai. I work for the University of Florida in the Family and Consumer Sciences department. And then Ann is with us too. Ann, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Ann Yaselanis. I'm the Residential Horticulture Extension Agent and the Master Gardener Coordinator with IFAS Extension in Polk County.
So just if you haven't used Zoom very much, here are some of the, just a general tip idea. But if you want to find the chat box, you can ask questions and things like that, and we'll try to get to them throughout the presentation, but probably most likely at the end. And so you may have to hover over the bottom to get the tools to show up. And your chat feature might be in the more section. So there's like a ... and it says more, and you can click on that and find chat, and then you can type in things or see what other people are saying too. So if that's of interest. And then at the end of this, we're going to send you a short evaluation, and we really appreciate your feedback. It helps a lot in just what we do in the future ones, and how we could maybe, what parts you don't need so much on, and maybe what parts you want to hear more on. So if you can do the survey, we'd be grateful. So thank you for that. And we'll get started with Ann here. She'll talk about what to grow.
Okay. So today we're going to talk a little bit, I'm going to talk a little bit first about vegetable gardening and what we can grow this time of year, or what we could be doing this time of year. And then I'll hand it over to Andrea, and she'll talk about how all of these things that we could be growing in our gardens this summer could be used in the kitchen. And if you have questions, you can type those in the chat and we'll get to those. Andrea will see those, and we'll hold those till the end if you don't mind. Whoops. All right, so it's summer, it's hot. So summer in the Florida edible garden is a little bit different than other times of year. This is actually our slowest time of year in the edible garden, and actually there's the least amount that we could be planting. So if you attend any of our either our warm season or cool season classes, there's a lot more plants that we list. And just a couple things to be mindful of when we're looking at growing things in the edible garden this summer is our hot, muggy temperatures. I'm sure everyone's feeling those. Those can lead to more disease and insect issues. So getting out and checking on your plants very frequently is really, really important to catch those before they get too bad. Additionally, with our high night temperatures, we don't get summer tomatoes. So those big tomatoes you're used to growing and eating in other regions, we don't have those. We can grow the smaller cherry type tomatoes in the summer, but none of those big tomatoes you might be used to growing somewhere else. And really look for crops that are native to more Southeast Asia or the Caribbean. Those are going to be plants that can survive here in their summer temperatures. And then just as you work outside in your garden, remember to take care of yourself while you're out there. It gets hot very easily, doesn't cool down much in the evening. Make sure you're wearing breathable clothing. I know we do emphasize covering up to help with mosquitoes, but you do want to be mindful of, if you're covering up, that you have breathable clothing on, so you don't overheat. Additionally, sunscreen and a hat and water are always good to have right outside with you. So we always like to tell people, kind of have an area of the yard where you've got your little setup going, so you don't think, oh, it's too much work for me to go inside and get water or sunscreen now. Never mind, I'll get it later. And then all of a sudden you've got a problem. So it's nice to have a little, you know, a cart or something set up so you have all of that there with you. And it's easy for you to remember to do all that every time you go out. Another helpful tip that one of my master gardeners shared was, I mean, even when you get outside in the early morning, sometimes you're working in the full sun. And she has found that using a beach umbrella or like a picnic canopy and moving that around the garden as she works has really helped to give her some shade. So that's an additional thing that you can do to get a little bit of relief when you're working out in the hot sun. So we're ready to garden in the summer, but what do we need to do in our landscape to get ready to grow our edible plants? If you have a site selected, you may have all of this down pat. But if you're looking for somewhere to start an edible garden, no matter what size, these are some of the things that you need to look for. Somewhere with well-drained soil, full sun, convenient for you to go out and actually harvest and utilize those plants and actually check on them frequently. It's real easy to put an edible garden somewhere hidden out in your yard, but will you go out when you're cooking to actually, you know, trim some herbs or, you know, grab some tomatoes or whatever it might be? You want to make sure that it's somewhere where you're going to actually use it. And large enough for what you're growing. So starting out small is always a good idea, and expanding as you know, get interested and make sure that you're going to be using those things that you're growing. And certainly if you want to start small and then just kind of plant some of your edibles into your ornamental landscape, that's something you can do as well. So it doesn't all have to be dedicated specifically to vegetable gardens. So if you have that full sun site and well-drained soil, now that's not quite
when
as
you get a
important.
minute, can you get the milk?
Oh, Andrea, can we mute somebody on there? You can grow them really in any kind of container or raised bed or anything. So you can see a variety of situations here, from buckets to raised beds to bags that are filled with soil, hydroponics, all sorts of things that you can use to grow your edible plants. So usually people like to have a little bit of a mix of things, you know, a small raised bed and a few things in the ground, or herbs in a container and, you know, the larger sprawling edible plants out in the yard, that sort of thing. So really a mix of all of these things is certainly something that you can do, and there's lots of ways you can build things yourself as far as raised beds, or on the screen here you can see the little Rubbermaid container, which is a hydroponic system. Lots of different ways that you can grow your edible plants in a dedicated bed. If you look, whoop, that went too fast. If you look at, oh, let me go back here. If you look at this picture on the left of your screen, and actually the bottom couple as well, that shows some of our edible plants just planted right into our landscape. So that large picture on the left there, you can kind of see in the foreground some blueberries. So they've used blueberry plants as shrubs. And in that same yard is the picture on the bottom right, where they have chives and some ornamental cabbage and kale used as kind of a lining of a bed. So there's lots of ways that you can incorporate some of these things into your existing landscape as well. We're having issues with sound. Andrea, can you hear me?
I can.
I can too, Ann.
Okay. All right. I'm not sure what the sound issue is. I'm sorry.
I know a couple people had problems with it. I was trying to check.
Okay.
Thanks. And sorry, I did hit the mouse one time, Ann, so that was
That's okay.
Sorry, everybody.
So yeah, we can do a little bit of incorporating those plants into beds and into the landscape as well. But it is important that we create a plan. So whether we're doing our couple containers or raised beds, some stuff in the ground, whatever combination you want to get started with, or maybe you have a raised bed and are interested in adding some other things. I know this year I've been growing some plants. Well, I have been growing plants in some raised beds. And this summer I decided to put in some some Seminole pumpkins, which take up lots and lots of space. And so I was not prepared and put them in my raised bed, which is very small, and they are now covering half the plants in the landscape bed I put them in. So moving forward, I need to create a plan to incorporate not only my raised bed area, but some in-ground plantings as well. I do have herbs and things I keep in containers. So the raised bed, container herbs, and some of that in-ground stuff is what is working for me. And drawing up a plan now that I know how much space I really need for some of these things will be much more helpful in creating a successful edible garden. Additionally, creating a seasonal plan. You can track these things in a notebook or gardening journal or calendar, so that we are mindful of rotation, or, you know, if you've had issues with growing certain things, or, you know, I grew my Seminole pumpkins this year and I am very well aware this year how big they are, but by next summer, am I going to remember that? I probably should write that down and make a note that, you know, don't put those in the raised bed. They grew 20 feet, you know, wide, and I need to have much more space for those. So any kind of notes, supplies that you're using, places you purchase seeds, any of those sorts of things, tools you found helpful, all of that's really important to have in some sort of a plan. Additionally, as we talk about crop rotation, which is very important, and we have a fact sheet that we can send out to you on easy ways to rotate your crops, it's really important to track that as well. And these are just some sample rotations that you can make. And the reason that we talk about crop rotation is because we need to rotate out of growing families in each garden area in each season. Because if you plant the same plant family in, you know, the raised bed every single year, we tend to have more issues with pests. So we kind of want to rotate that. And if you see in that top kind of left rotation plan with the arrows going around, the black arrows, you can see that we have listed, you can see the legumes, the different types of beans and peas. Well, those are all in the same family. So we have to rotate all the way out of there. So underneath there, you'll see the brassicas, Brussels sprouts, cabbage. You can't rotate from Brussels sprouts to cabbage. You've got to rotate all the way out of that family. And so we've got that colorful sample plan on the bottom that you can use. And again, we have resources on showing you how to rotate as well. We can help you with that. So once we have all of that, we need to prepare our landscape beds. And we want to till in organic matter about 3 weeks out from planting time. Any compost that you have on site or bagged compost, any kinds of manures or any type of organic material you can add to either a raised bed container or you know, in-ground planting is preferable. And you'll see there's some dates on there that are pretty important. So particularly with the animal manures, you can see if you add those directly to your landscape beds, they have to be done 90 to 120 days from planting. So typically with manures, I suggest that people add the manures to the compost pile and then
in the golf cart.
compost them in
Yeah,
the
I've
pile,
got all kinds of groceries out there.
so that you don't have to worry about that 90 to 120 days out. Whoop.
Sorry, if you can just go back.
I got it. I unmuted me. And so I would suggest composting everything you have in your own compost pile, and then you can add it when it is fully composted to your planting beds. And you can see their uncomposted organic material. That just means stuff that's not fully broken down. So if you're looking at your own compost pile and you recognize things in there, so if you put in, you know, an apple core and you pull it out and you can still see the apple core visible, that's what it means by uncomposted. And the reason we have to do that 30 days out is as things are continually breaking down, they'll be pulling nutrients that won't be available to plants, so your seeds might not actually start. So I would just, again, suggest composting. And again, you can buy, I saw a question pop up about black cow. Any compost mix is totally fine to add straight to it. If you're buying bagged manure, that's all composted manure. And then we want to smooth and flatten it out. In containers, it's a little bit different. You still want to choose something well-drained, and you can mix your own or buy bagged mix as well. And you can add in your compost of any kind. Again, just make sure that it's going to be well-drained. We don't want anything too heavy. And typically your containers are going to be need to be watered a little bit more than those in-ground plants, or even plants in a raised bed many times. So just be mindful that, you know, that could happen. Clay pots typically dry out much more quickly than a plastic container. And so just, you know, keep an eye on them, and you'll have to replace that soil once every year. Now, if you're interested in a hydroponic type of a system, those are the ones you can see in that picture in the bottom, with the gentleman lifting up that, that growing media there. This is when you're growing plants using water with nutrients in it instead of any type of soil. So it's a soilless mix. And that's a little bit different. We have separate classes on that altogether, just because that takes a little bit more finessing there. You also have to be prepared to water your plants. So if you have containerized plants that have to be watered more frequently, and typically in general, our vegetables will need to be watered more frequently than our landscape plants, and how are you going to do that? Certainly hand watering is an option, and totally fine. But I always suggest that people look to irrigation, micro irrigation, just because it's pretty easy to install. You can install it in a hose bib right outside, and you know, if you put it out there this year and decide, oh, I really don't like my garden out here, I'm going to move it to the total other side of the house, you can pull that all apart and reinstall it somewhere else. So it's not a permanent system that you have to really worry about. And if you expand your vegetable garden, you know, season after season, you can add to it pretty easily as well. It doesn't require much water pressure. You can run it much more frequently than our automatic sprinkler systems. You can see some pictures here of some options on how people use micro irrigation. We have workshops on this as well, on how to set up a micro irrigation system. And really, it's quite easy for any type of edible garden. And the way that it distributes water right at the base of the plant. So if you see that picture on the bottom left with the containers, those have some vegetable starts in them, and those are applying the water right to the base of the plant where it needs to be. So we're reducing moisture on the leaf surfaces. So again, that'll help reduce our issues with pests, particularly in this summer months here. So this is a chart from one of our handouts that we can provide you with. If you look at it, this is our warm season crops, and we have another one for cool season crops. And this is specifically for our county. You can see at the top going across is all of the months, and going down on the left side in the column is all of the vegetable crops that one could grow here. And our planting months are indicated with the little X in each month. So the top, you can see their bush bean with the little X in February, March, April. That's when you would plant them. And then those orange shaded areas are when harvest would occur. So if you kind of look down the middle column where we are here, June, there's not a lot of X's. There are a few things you could plant, some things you'd be harvesting now. And then actually, if you think about it, starting to gear up for fall planting is when you look at that column for August, and we have a lot of seed starting and preparation going on at that time. It's still pretty hot in August. You don't really think about starting a fall garden in August most of the time, but that is when we start. So here in June, there's a few things still that you can plant. But if you're not quite ready to get something started now, this is the perfect time to start thinking about planning for your August and fall garden. And those are still be warm season crops. So we're going to go over a couple of things that you can plant now. And then Andrea will talk about how to cook and prepare them. First one here is okra. Lots of people very familiar with it. It's harvesting now. Takes about 60 days to harvest, and you want to harvest the pods when they're about 2 to 3 inches long. The main thing to realize with the okra is it makes a pretty large plant. So it can grow 2 to 7 feet tall. So make sure that you have enough space in your edible garden for that. So if you're thinking about a container garden, you might be, planting one okra in that container. It's a very attractive plant though, so I think you could certainly really easily plant this out in your landscape and incorporate it right in with your ornamental plants if that's something that you're interested in, or something you just even want to try. Sweet potatoes, this is another one that takes up a lot of space, although it's not vertical space, it's horizontal space. So it's going to grow kind of like a vining ground cover. So this would be a good one to try now. If you have an area of the landscape that doesn't have much going on, you can plant that sweet potato and it will take over that place. It's going to create those tubers for you to eat. You can also eat the greens, but it'll take about 85 to 130 days to harvest those, and you can dig those up and they'll continually produce for you into the fall as well. Another thing that you can start now is southern peas. Those are a bit quicker to harvest, a lot smaller than those first two plants that we talked about. A large variety of southern peas that you could grow here, and you can continually harvest on these as well. So all of these that we just talked about, just continually harvest on those once they start producing, and harvest until you're ready to stop. Ready to start maybe your next garden, or production kind of starts to linger. All right, so these are the tomatoes that we can grow in the summertime here in Florida. Cherry tomatoes. Most of our cherry tomato varieties are indeterminate, meaning again, like those plants we just talked about, you can continually harvest fruit as the plant continues to produce it. Usually our larger size tomatoes are the ones that are determinate, meaning that they produce one crop and then the plant is done. So with the cherry tomatoes, you know, we've planted those maybe in May, and you can continue harvest those until they stop producing. And you can see there's a red variety here in the photo, but there's a yellow, kind of yellow-orange variety. One is sun gold and one is yellow pear, that are really great varieties for summer gardens here in Florida, and produce a lot of tomatoes. Another one, Jerusalem artichoke. So again, you're producing that underground tuber, so it's going to take a little bit longer to create that underground, with 130 days to harvest. Starting these early, you can start those April and then plant them through the summer months. This is another one that gets really tall, so 6 to 10 feet. So just like that okra, it's going to be a taller plant, and this might be something you want to incorporate into your ornamental landscape. And you can kind of see what the foliage looks like, but also the flowers are really attractive. So I think this could be a really easy one to add into your ornamental landscape. Peppers, huge variety of peppers that you can grow in the landscape. These are much smaller plants, really easy to grow one in a small container, and with 60 to 80 days to harvest. If you started them from transplant, you'll get something pretty quickly. So this is a nice one for someone growing on a patio or porch, or wanting to start something in a smaller space, just to kind of try something out. And again, lots of varieties of peppers that you can grow. Eggplant, this is another one that's a little bit smaller growing, 90 to 115 days to harvest. Lots of varieties of eggplants as well. Another one you can grow in a container if you want, just, you know, it's bigger than a pepper, but very similar in that you can grow one in a container on a patio or porch or something like that. There's a wide variety of herbs you can grow. I have listed some here that grow well through the summer months. As far as herbs, the pictures I have here are mostly of them growing in the ground, but you can certainly grow them in containers, in raised beds. You can grow them hydroponically. You can grow them in containers mixed with flowers. Lots of things that you can do with your herbs. They're pretty versatile, really attractive. And you can certainly mix those in with your landscape beds as well. So just to kind of show you what I have here in the photos, that top left photo that's kind of a darker purpley, that is a fennel. You can grow that right in your landscape. The top right is a Mexican tarragon. I have grown that as kind of a border plant in a landscape bed, kind of groups of 3 to 6, very attractive, has a lovely smell. So that's a nice thing to think about if you're planting herbs and using them in your ornamental landscape, is they're great if they smell good to plant them, you know, near the entrance of your house, or if there's a back patio you like to sit at and enjoy and just be able to enjoy that fragrance, whether it's from wind or walking by or rain that kind of kicks up that fragrance and the oils in those herbs. It's just another way to enjoy them, not only to be able to look at them and eat them, but to take advantage of the smell as well. And then the bottom left is a mint, and the bottom right is a rosemary. Rosemary is really great to use as a small shrub, edging plant, that sort of thing. It is evergreen and will look like it does in that photo pretty well year round. And there were some questions about basil going forward. And yes, it's pretty susceptible to things. It's kind of hard to grow that in the summertime. Mine grows all right in the summer, but it's not my greatest herb for summertime. Really have to be very, very careful with the water that you apply to that, for sure. And make sure that it's, you know, well drained, keep the leaves dry, all of those things. So when is your summer garden done? There's quite a few of the plants that I mentioned that you can continually harvest on. And I would suggest doing that until you are ready to stop. And maybe you are ready to stop because you want to get your stuff prepped and planted for next season. Or maybe you're ready to stop because you have a certain amount of plants that you want to collect seed for. And so at that point, you know, you've got to collect the seed at a certain time of, you know, flowering and seed production. So then you would be collecting the seed, and usually when the plants start to flower and seed, they start to decline in health, and you'd have to, you know, keep that in mind as well. Additionally, you may want to look to growing a cover crop or doing some soil solarization at this time of year. So that might have some input as far as, you know, how long you want to keep going with that summer garden and when you want to stop, or even if you want to grow anything at all. Some people, gardeners, decide to take the summer off from their edible garden. Many times there's lots of other things going on in the ornamental landscape, like weeds and pruning and things that have to be done, and it's hard to keep up with all of that in addition to the edible garden. And also, you know, there's not a lot of edible plants that you can grow in the summer, and so this is usually the time of year if a vegetable gardener is going to take some time off, it would be summer. So you can grow a cover crop, as you see here. I wouldn't suggest that you do a cover crop if you have containers or very small raised beds or anything like that. But if you're worried about an area being overcome by weeds and you're not growing anything in it in the summer, you can certainly look to a cover crop. Think about those garden areas. If you do leave them open in the summer and not planting anything in there, just think about weeds and things that might show up in those spots, and how you want to manage those. Do you want to just leave the soil open and routinely weed the garden beds, or do you want to, you know, plant something in there? You could overseed a cover crop, or maybe some annual flowers or something like that, just to help with that weed reduction. Additionally, something else you could do in the summer, and this is really if needed, is to solarize the soil. So solarization is basically taking the heat from the sun, heating up the soil, and killing any pests that might be in that soil. So this is something to do maybe if you've routinely had, you know, issues with nematodes or something like that, and they just don't seem to go away. Typically you look to doing a solarization. So one thing to remember though is that when you solarize, it's going to kill all the good guys, all the good soil microbes and things like that, as well as all the bad ones. So unless you find that it's needed, you may not want to do that if you've worked to develop a really nice soil profile in your garden bed. The main thing to remember here is this is a 6-week process. So usually this is done June, July, and left for 6 weeks. And you can see they're laying down a clear plastic, kind of tucking it in like a sheet on a bed, making sure all sides are tucked in, and that is left in the garden to just heat up all summer long. And we have our full instructions there, and we can send those to you as well. So that's something that some people choose to do in their garden beds in the summer. As far as other maintenance, fertilization will depend on what you're growing. Usually a couple light fertilizations over that growing season. Again, depending on what you're growing, those leafy vegetables might need more nitrogen, the root vegetables more potassium. So just make sure that you're selecting the appropriate thing and following the label that's on your fertilizer bag. With our pest management, we like to promote integrated pest management. So I mentioned at the very beginning of this, walking out and looking at things because of the issues that we have with heat and humidity. So monitoring is very important, that we get out there and just look and see what is going on. And one of the main things that will help us reduce our pest issues, and by pests I mean insects and disease and things that cause disease, basically. And so proper garden management means sanitation, watering, and scouting. Those three things will really help you reduce pest issues. So sanitation meaning keeping areas between your rows clean, reducing weeds, with watering, not over-watering onto in between rows, and watering on leaf surfaces, watering in the evening, that sort of thing. And also scouting, meaning walking through and looking for pests and that, trying to catch things when they start. With diseases, it's really hard to do a lot, but you can certainly try and stop bacterial and fungal issues that could lead to diseases. One of your main ways to reduce disease in your vegetable plants is to purchase resistant or treated plants or seeds, and they'll say on either the seed packet or on the transplant if they are treated for, you know, powdery mildew resistance or something like that. And again, proper spacing, making sure airflow happens, reducing the amount of water on those plants, crop rotation, all of these things to promote a healthy vegetable landscape will help you out with our disease and pests. Same with weeds, we put those right in there with our pests as well. Mulching between rows, hand pulling, not watering the rows, again, that goes right with our sanitation. So that's all I have about growing our summer vegetables, and I'll pass it over to Andrea, and she will talk about getting ready to enjoy all of those things that you're growing in your garden this summer.
All right, and you can hear me okay?
Yep, I can hear you just fine.
Okay, good. We have a couple of questions. Would you like to take those at the end, or would you like to take those now? What would be your preference? I think a couple of quick ones.
I can do them now.
All right, we'll do now. And so Christy had a really good one on crop rotation. Let me just make sure I have it right. But just that, you know, if you plant like tomatoes this, you know, summer, can you plant them next summer as long as you have a crop in between, or do you need to switch out in between? So she's asking, yeah, is it like within, you know, each year, or is each growing season like, you know?
I would switch between growing season. Yeah, I would switch between growing season for sure, definitely. And it should be fine to go back again. But if you find that, particularly with tomatoes, what will be the issue would be nematodes. If you find that starts to be a problem, then you may have to totally move them out, you know, maybe to, instead of in a raised bed here, okay, well, I'm rotating them all the way out. They're going to be in containers annually now, where I can switch out the garden soil and that sort of thing. But yes. Yeah.
Okay, so she could plant them like next summer also, same spot, but could have the problem. Okay.
Right.
And then just, did you have any other suggestions on basil? Just anything about a fungus, like, or black beetles?
Anything chewing on it like a beetle, I would hand pick them, hand remove them. If you can keep on top of it, that's the best way to do that. You don't want to be spraying a lot of things on something you're going to be eating. And then, yeah, they tend to get some fungal issues. Those leaves are pretty sensitive to moisture. So really, you know, making sure it's in the full sun, it's drying out, the soil isn't really wet, all of those things will really help out basil. And I think maybe if you have a lot of problems, making sure it's in its own pot might help too. It could be getting crowded by other plants and, you know, keeping it a little bit more moist than it might like to be.
All right, and then just a raised bed, making sure that it's well drained. How would you be able to check that, would you say?
Yeah, well, you could check, you could pour some water in and see how quickly it drains. So it should fairly well drain through it. I mean, if you pour water in and it sits there for a half an hour, you know, I would mix in some organic matter, potentially, depending on what you're planting. Like if you're planting directly in the ground, you may have sandy soil, but you might not. So potentially you could have clay and you might want to add some organic matter and sand to it to drain. If that's still not helping, if you have a raised bed or container, you can control that soil a little bit better and you'll be able to mix it so that you've created a well-drained potting mix.
Okay. We have a couple other ones from Heather and Madison. Would it be okay? Should we just hold those to the end, you think? Or would you like to take those?
Yep, we can hold those and we'll get those at the end. That way if anybody else thinks of any. Yep.
Yeah, then we'll get to your questions. So Heather and Madison, thanks for your patience. Yeah, thank you, Madison. Okay, so just quick things. Now that you know how to cook them, or to cook them, which ones you'd want to plant. Well, what I'm hoping to help you is try to figure out when you get the harvest, then how you could use them to the best of your ability. You know, sometimes we, you know, blank out on ideas once you have a prosperous amount. So there's always the internet, but I'm hoping to just give you some ideas and maybe some fun nutrient facts also. So in general, I just want to get across, you know, the point is to try to enjoy more vegetables. So when you guys are planning, this is awesome. You know, that's why I work with Anne, is because, you know, we're promoting the same thing. And so I'm just going to, you know, talk about that, preparing them safely, storing them, how you could cook them, and then preserving them, which is important too. So we're really trying to get Americans to eat more vegetables, right? We're definitely not getting enough. And the goal overall is about half the plate fruits and vegetables. So if you look down at your plate, the idea would be to have half of it filled with some sort of fruit or vegetable. And if you can eat the rainbow, not the Skittles, you know, right? But just different colors, each of those different colors does something different for you. So I could talk about, you know, the orange ones, not just carrots, but sweet potatoes, papaya, even mangoes. They have that vitamin A that helps your eyes that we learned about when we were kids. And so it also helps your skin look beautiful too. So just like each of the different colors does something different. So that's why it's important to get the different ones. And even the white ones have a lot of potential, I guess, cancer fighters actually. So, you know, what can we do? And so just ideas with all these vegetables that we just talked about, just trying to think if you could use them in place of some of the meat. Sometimes just cutting them up, especially mushrooms, but just other vegetables, eggplant, you know, it's just a good filler, right? And then you could use them as the main event. So sometimes you don't always, you know, have to have a big meat thing, but using vegetables as that and then having the meat as a garnish, and then trying to enjoy them at meals and snacks when you can, and adding extra to the recipes. Okay, so just preparing them safely. Sometimes I question, you know, well, if it's growing in my home garden, then why do I need to wash it? So it's just that, you know, there's bacteria that could be in that soil or that water, you know, even if it's in your home garden. And it also can become contaminated after it's harvested. You know, maybe don't mean to, definitely, but just make sure to wash it all under running water. And you don't need soap. You don't need a commercial produce solution. Not now. Even, you know, they've just found the best is just running water over it, cool, just so you don't heat it up and cause more bacteria. And then using produce brush for any firm produce. So, you know, if Anne's having those Seminole pumpkins, you know, I would brush it. And then when she cuts it up, it won't, you know, get the inside on the cutting board, you know, the outside still dirty. So just those things are important. And then always making sure to keep the meat separate from, or the raw meat, right, separate from the vegetables that won't be cooked, because you don't want to get the contamination from the raw meat to the vegetables. Okay, so washing the cutting boards in between, hot soapy water is what you need, and then just really trying to keep those separately. And I think it's separate. And I think, you know, using the tongs is a big one. You know, when you take the vegetable and put them on the grill, you know, and then using the same tongs to take them off. Just, you really want to make sure if they've touched meat at all, right, is that you need to wash those tongs in between. Okay. Okay. And then just the 4 steps, then cleaning it, separating it from the meat, cooking it, if you, especially with meat, right? But if you cut up any sort of vegetables, it goes in the refrigerator. So sometimes, you know, you say, you know, can I leave this out here? And so just once it's cut, put it in. So that's the general on that one. So now let's take a few minutes to talk about specifics. Okay, so okra. So it's famous for that slimy texture. It can be eaten raw, cooked, and it's really low in calories and fat-free. So this one's great if you're trying to lose some weight, right? It can be stored in a perforated plastic bag, so I wouldn't cut it off from air, but in the fridge would be the best. The more it is cut, the slimier it becomes, right? So some people hate the slime, and so just for them, if your spouse is just not all about that, then just don't cut it as much or have it raw, right? So you can definitely do that. And it's that soluble fiber that actually makes that slime, and it's good for us. So, reduces cholesterol. And you can also eat the leaves, and they have that thickening aspects also. So sometimes people put them in soup. So just a fun tip there. I actually am planting okra right now, and I have no flowers on it. So I'm gonna have to talk to Ann and see why. But I would say, you know, I can use the leaves at least, right? Even if I get fluffy leaves. So just 5 quick ways. I have a creative friend who loves okra, and he's put it with his eggs on that top picture and actually cut it up and put it in his waffles. So they don't have a lot of flavor, so you can do fun things like that. But they're great for thickening soups. You don't need that cornstarch or anything like that. You can just throw in a few okra. And also cooking them with tomatoes, onions, delicious. And then there's actually okra marshmallows. And so you can look that up if you get a lot of okra and you're just like, what do I do? So that's an option. So sweet potatoes, you know, you might be more familiar with those. Definitely eat the peel if you can, you know, wash that off. And then there's a lot of nutrients right in that peel and right underneath it. So trying to get that. And then you can eat the greens. You know, they do that a lot in the Philippines, actually. They're eaten fresh in salads, or they're kind of like, they're kind of used like spinach, right? So they're not like a hearty green like collards. And so, yeah, so just you don't have to cook them as long. And so here's just some different ways maybe to use sweet potatoes. So you obviously you're thinking, well, I know I use sweet potatoes, and you probably do, but you could stuff them, or you could add them to smoothies or like to oatmeal. There's a lot of recipes out there because they're naturally a little bit sweeter, right? And you could add them to pancakes or bread. You can even eat them raw. They serve them in school in California and just to the kids as snacks. And I have a good recipe for 4-ingredient brownies where you use sweet potatoes, like a nut butter, such as peanut butter, maple syrup, and cocoa powder. And it makes some really good brownies or cookies. So just trying to think of different ways if you happen to have a plentiful harvest. Okay, so southern beans. So southern peas, they're part of the bean family. There's those 3 different kinds. We have the Crowders, the cream peas, black-eyed peas. And so the flavors are slightly different, but they're all a good source of fiber and iron. So a lot of times, sometimes, especially women, we're just, the iron can be helpful. So you want to cook these before you eat them. But the cream peas are a little more mild, and then the black-eyed peas somewhere in between, and the Crowders have that robust flavor. Okay, so cooking them, just some different ideas. You might have heard New Year's Day for good luck is this black-eyed peas and collard greens. So if you're from the north, and a lot of that's traditional in the south. And you could also use them as a dip, so a bean dip, you know, just like they have hummus made out of chickpeas, garbanzo beans. You can use these beans once they're cooked and make them into a dip also. And they're great. Like you could take a big tomato and stuff some beans with them, with some corn maybe, and top it with cheese. So just some different ideas for using those. They're, yeah, really good for you. So, and then cherry tomatoes. So these are high in lycopene, and even more so after you're cooked. And so you get a lot of vitamin C if you eat them raw, and then you get the lycopene if you have it cooked. So it's kind of, you can enjoy them both ways then. and their taste is best if they're stored at room temperature. You know, once they get ripe then, really ripe, then you put them in the fridge because that will hold them. But just the flavors will continue to develop on the counter, whereas in the fridge, it kind of, if they aren't fully ripe, it's not helpful to the tomato flavor at all. So just note on that. And then cherry tomatoes, if you have a lot and you don't just eat them before you even get in the house, they are great. You can use them as a topping or fish or roast them because they'll kind of burst open and that flavor will go everywhere. And there's tomato pie and soup and salad, right? Tossing it with pasta. And then you can also slice them in half and oven dry them. So dehydrate them, sun-dried tomatoes, right? Only not without the sun. So Jerusalem artichoke. So that's one Ann and Julie said they're gonna try to plant at the extension office, and I'm going to hold them to it some summer, next summer probably. But you don't have to peel them, and you can eat them raw or cooked, and they're mild tasting. So these are kind of a winner. They are like a water chestnut raw, and they have fewer calories than a potato, but you can cook them like a potato. So you can mash them, like puree them, and they're a bit sweeter than potatoes, or you can roast them and they're nutty, sweet, roasted vegetable. And then people use them in everything from soups to meatloaf. And I haven't had them a lot, but I'd love to experiment with those more. So peppers, just refrigerate these guys. The capsaicin, it gives them the hot flavor, and so that is actually very good for us. So those spicy peppers are good for you. So for those of you who love hot sauce, there's something advantage. And wearing gloves when cutting is wise if you have a spicy pepper, because water does not wash that away. I don't know if anybody else have had that problem, but you learn really quick about the water. You're sitting trying to find out, remedies, but milk or vinegar can sometimes help. But the spicy heat, in case you're wondering and trying to stay away from it, it's in the inner pith and rib of the pepper, but that spiciness is good for you. So you can have a little bit. Sometimes people actually use the capsaicin in a cream on your skin to help kill pain. So kind of, it's a good thing, I guess. And then bell peppers. So these, it's interesting. They have more vitamin C than an orange, and most of the green ones will turn orange and red if left on the vine long enough. The nutrients continue to increase and the peppers get sweeter. So, each of the different colors has a different flavor. So if you say, I don't like peppers, well, maybe you could try just the different colors, even the orange to the red, it's different. So it's kind of cool. I found just working with kids, they seem to like the orange ones the most. So just interesting fact. So here's just some different ideas. So stuffing them, right, can be really fun. You just take off the tops and then, put the rice in them, maybe some of those southern peas. You can use them raw in the hummus as a dip, right? Stir fries are great with these omelets, frittatas. You could roast them here, they're on a pizza. So just some different ideas. And eggplant, so this guy, to test for ripeness, you push on it with your thumb and it shouldn't spring back. So then you're like, okay, we're ready. And you can store it in the refrigerator, but store it unwrapped. And it contains a lot of water. So some recipes will tell you to cut it and then salt it. And you don't have to do that, but what it does then is it prevents the water from seeping out when you cook it. So if you're making like a soup, with the eggplant or something, you probably don't have to do that. So if you're making eggplant parmesan, such as pictured here, sometimes people like to do that just so it doesn't get watery. But I've done it both ways, and either way is delicious. So if you want to skip that step, I say go ahead. So just some different ways to do it. You can, you can do that top picture there. I was just thinking, all you would do right is you would slice it really thin, cook that eggplant, and then you could put some pasta in the middle and kind of wrap up the pasta with those cooked eggplant strips, and then you top it with sauce, and that would be really pretty if you're having people over, something like that. And then on the bottom, it's baba ganoush, and so it's a Middle Eastern dip, and I was actually in Greece, and that's what it looks like. It doesn't maybe look as appealing as a top picture, but it's still really delicious. So it has some lemon juice, parsley, tahini, and then you can also use things like just You can just prick that eggplant and you can put it in the oven. You can put it in the microwave. So it doesn't have to be complicated or worry about what to do, and you can eat the skin. So now just a quick note on preserving some vegetables here. So freezing them, you want to start with the high quality ones and then freezing them within a few hours if possible. So the idea is not to wait until, you know, you're looking in the fridge and you're realizing you're not going to be able to use all those. So trying to freeze when they're at their peak would be the best. And then with vegetables, most of them you have to blanch. So fruits you don't, but blanching, all you have to do is put it in boiling water. For each vegetable has a different amount of time, but just boiling water and then putting it in really cold water. And that'll stop the nutrients and stop the enzymes from continuing to deteriorate, I guess. And so you want to keep them the best of the best in the freezer. I mean, couple vegetables that don't need to be blanched. So love those, right? And those are some of the ones we talked about. So peppers don't need to be blanched, or tomatoes either, or either do cut onions. So all those you can just cut up or however you would like to freeze them and stick them in the freezer if you get a lot. Okay, so drying them, the calories just, they don't change. So just FYI on that. The fiber doesn't change either. So that is a really good thing. We don't lose any fiber by drying them. And then some nutrients can be lost, such as the vitamin C, because that is lost with heating. So when you heat it up higher temperatures, that's why we lose that vitamin C. And so blanching is actually recommended here also, if you can, to, you know, enhance that quality, because it will stop them, even though they're cooked, just really keep them at the best of the best and help with bacteria, you know, so they don't, so you have less risk of that. So drying vegetables, then you can use a dehydrator or you can use your oven. I lived in North Carolina and I used my car windshield once, but I don't think, you know, it's just not recommended as the best method. So just, you really want to try to do those safely, and then you need enough heat to draw out the moisture and adequate air circulation then. So peas, to dry those, you leave them on the pods, on the plants until it has died, and then died down before the pods is split open. So that's how you dry the peas. Okay, and then the dried shelled peas will keep for many months. So you just want to keep those on there. So there's different things you can do, such as, you know, sweet potato fruit roll up and dried okra chips. So these are just some different options. And then canning vegetables. So we could do a whole class on this. I know we don't have time today, but just in general, what you need to know about canning, you know, there's a safe way to do it. And so pressure canning is what you need to do with most vegetables then. The exceptions are if you have tomatoes with a little acid, and then any pickled vegetables. Those you can do the kind of easier, maybe, boiling water bath. And so pressure canning and Instapot is not recommended for this. Just pressure canning is the only safe way. So trying to use those at the same, at their peak again, and just remembering that they can be as nutritious as fresh because you're making them just right from the peak. And then pickling, so that's our other option, right? So just trying different things like cucumbers, you know, there's great pickled okra, peppers, other vegetables, and so there's great recipes. And if you want to email me, I can send you some good sources for some recipes. But if you look, and a lot of extensions have great recipes, so you could look, yeah, get into that, I guess. But two different types of pickles. There's the brine pickles and the quick pickles. You can go either way, and they're just following the directions, especially the first time, and then, you know, just making sure so they're safe. All right, so that's all I have, and so we'll take some time here for some questions. I know there's some for Anne, and so thank you for staying on for those of you who have Anne questions. And really, we have this short survey, right? And so if you can do that, then we'll know what we should talk about more, or what maybe, you know, I guess what you'd like to hear and what you didn't learn from this, and why, you know, so then we can be better presenters, so that if you're ever able to come to one of our classes again, that you will enjoy it even more. So, so Alex asked if there's a link to the survey. I'll see if I
grab that. For some reason, it will not let me cut and paste that, Andrea, in.
You know, I actually still have it in my, copied thing. So
Thank you.
I just put it up. So if you
Okay.
guys actually want to just click on the link, you can take it right now, or you can just have it on a screen. Otherwise, we'll pester you with that later. So.
All right, let me grab some questions. Lots of questions. Here we go.
There was definitely yours at the beginning. Some people asked about
the brownie recipe. I know people wanted the brownie recipe.
We'll send that to you
You'll
guys.
have to send that. And we'll send out the survey in email as well. So some of this stuff we can put into that email. It might be the easiest way to send the brownie recipe. I'm just going to start at the bottom and I'll go up on the questions. Well, I better start at the top because we'll probably get more. All right, I think we got most of the gardening ones.
Well, Heather had one just on the commercial.
Oh, that's right, we stopped. We stopped somewhere, we were gonna grab them. Heather, yes, commercial weed blocking. Yeah, okay, so there's a question about recommendations for the commercial weed block it's landscape fabric for preventing weeds, and I would suggest against that and just plant it straight into the soil, because a lot of times what happens with weeds is they're going to germinate on top of that anyway from wind and birds and that sort of thing, and it gets to be kind of a pain to dig into that if you replant multiple times and all that. So I would plant straight into the soil and not worry about the weed block. If you have a good couple inches of mulch, that'll help with weeds for sure. And then question about caterpillars. So if caterpillars are on watermelons and cucumbers, couple things you can do. You can hand remove and smush them or whatever you want to do. Another option is for any caterpillars, you can use a product that has, it's a BT product, BT, and it's Bacillus thuringiensis. It's a soil bacteria, and it will kill caterpillars, but just be mindful that it will kill all caterpillars, meaning your pest caterpillars and your monarchs and things like that. So as long as you're careful when you apply it and you just apply it on those problematic plants, that will be fine, and you should be able to purchase that anywhere. Recipes for collards.
I would say I have one, and if anybody else has any they would like to type in, but just I was thinking there's the colored wraps, really good. You just take the colored leaves and you put kind of like a hummus on them, and then you can roll them vegetables. You could put some chicken in there if you wanted, or some shrimp, and you just roll it up with that leaf then. It's really good. And so you could also use them like kale, where you could make colored chips. And so that would be kind of a way to shrink them down if you have a lot, and then they'd be really good for you. So do you have any others, Ann, offhand on that one?
No, I feel like this was one we talked about at one of our last ones, and somebody had a bunch of ideas, and now, of course, I can't remember any.
Yeah, so that would what I'd say there. And I do have to tell you guys on the brownies, so they're fudgy brownies, so just FYI, if you're looking for the cake fluffy ones, these are more moist. So I just want you to know.
I know any greens, I like greens in with like eggs. So eggs with either collards or kale or spinach. And then you can also, if you have some sweet potato, I was reading somewhere, and I did it, where someone was suggesting instead of just baking your sweet potatoes, that you like slow roast them at a really low temperature for like, I don't know, I think it was like 4 to 6 hours. And I will tell you, they were very, very sweet when I got done with them. So I would highly suggest it. I think I roasted them at like 250 maybe. It was real low.
Yeah, that would be, you're caramelizing those. Just a really quick.
They were good.
I know we have other questions, but just, collards in stir fries would be really good. And then just if any soup, like say you are having like chicken noodle soup or something that night, just chop them up and put them right in there. Just some ideas for really using them. They're so good for you. If you can try to figure out some ways to do them, or put them in casseroles, just kind of shred them up. I
would think they'd be good shredded up like in a lasagna or like a spaghetti sauce, where you could cut them really small.
Yeah, for sure. Or added to a chili. And then I was just looking at a website with a couple other suggestions, but they had, excuse me, oh, pureed into like a pesto. So instead of using basil for pesto, you could just use collard greens.
That's a good idea.
So, ideal.
There's some question on nutrition information on the sunchokes, and going back to that page about the sunchokes.
Yeah, let's see. You know, I know they had some really good ones. They are very good for you. I do remember that. I wanted to make sure I have the right. Yeah, let's see here. Just talking about those. I think it was vitamin C. Oh, God, yeah, inulin. That was the main note I made about those. They have like a prebiotic fiber in that. And so what it can do then is it stimulates good bacteria in you. And so that fights off the harmful bacteria, which could be really excellent for right now. You never know, right? And then it helps to fight the cancer stuff too. So yeah, they're a good one for us, and raw or cooked. So Anne, yep, I'm gonna hold you to planning that one, helping use more.
There was a question about storing herbs. Right. Do you want to talk about that at all?
Dried or fresh? I guess basil.
Dry. I'm assuming dried. Yeah.
Dried versus fresh.
I think so.
Like, I guess if they are fresh, the basil is the only one that stays out of the fridge, and the other one put in the fridge like a base, and then put a light bag over it. And then for the dried, once they're dried, then just keeping them away from heat and keeping them away from light. So if you can put them in, you know, a cabinet, just not right by the stove where everyone wants to put them. So those would be key things there.
Yeah, and she was saying fresh herbs too. Yeah, that's what I would. I mean, I vase them basically, put them in a vase. Yeah. And you most of the time, if you leave them on the counter, they don't get quite so wilty. And then freezing them. Yeah, and you can freeze them too. And I know that, Andrea, you had a slide in another presentation about putting them in oil or water in an ice cube tray.
Yeah, and just cutting them up. My mom does that a lot, actually, and just pops that ice cube tray in a soup or something. The one that doesn't work is cilantro. It doesn't keep its flavor very well, unfortunately. But
let's see, what else am I missing? Thank you for all the questions. This is great.
You guys are awesome.
This is a question
about just get to the
oh, sorry, go ahead, Andrea.
Oh, yeah, I was just getting to a slide. I think somebody just said the first. There we go. I think we got it. Okay, so I think there was another one for you, Anne. Just make sure.
I saw one about planting tomatoes and zucchini late summer. Yep. You'd start them late. Yep. So going back to that other slide, and I will make a note. Andrea will send out an email to everybody, but I will send her that planting and harvesting guide, so it'll tell you exactly when. And you can pull that. Actually, it's on our website too. Of course, off the top of my head, I can't think of what I've called it. I think it's vegetable crop planting and harvesting dates, but I'll email that out with the survey so that you'll know exactly when to plant everything. Then there was a question about deer. Oh, deer being attracted to herbs, probably, yeah. We don't have a lot of deer issues here, but they're gonna eat a lot of things probably, unfortunately.
Trying to think. You know, somebody asked, I think when I was talking about the okra, she just mentioned she has double flowers. I'm just, I guess, you know, if that's a problem, and I would say I'm just a little bit jealous. You see anything else, Anne? Trying to wrap
there were some great suggestions about cooking collards. I saw somebody said with coconut milk. That sounds awesome. Putting them into soup. Sweet potatoes, onions, and greens. Yeah, that sounds good. With apples, that sounds really good. Yep.
You guys are good. And there's one I'm just like trying to get people to eat more vegetables, you know, stubborn husbands. And somebody said, you know, treat them like a 5-year-old, sneak them in. Yeah, right. We could put some put some collards in those brownies.
One thing that we found recently is trying some smoothie recipes where you put in half to whole zucchinis and squashes because they really have no flavor when you put them in, but pretty
So true.
fibrous, I'm assuming, or whatever they're. Sometimes it's hard to get people to eat those. They can get slimy.
They'd be great in muffins and things like that, you know, the summer squash and zucchini. But puree just even in place of some of the oil. Okay, so I know we went over what time. Yeah, we'll get you guys. Thanks for staying on, everybody. Really appreciate it. You guys were a good group, so thank you.
Yeah, and so we'll send out the we do have a link. I know there was some questions about references and everything. So we have this is already on our YouTube channel, isn't it? This one?
I believe so, not obviously this exact one. So we'll post this one
Yes, we've recorded it before. We can send the link to the YouTube recording. So just for your reference, and we'll send out that vegetable planting guide and the crop rotation guide, and Andrew's brownie recipe, right? And then the survey, and that'll come in an email to you in, you know, a couple of days.
All right. Or maybe I'll really try to get it to you today just to pester you. So see if you can do the survey. Thank you all for staying on, and hopefully we'll, Ann and I have one coming up with, don't have the date on me right now, but it's in August on herbs. So just specifically herbs. So that'll be a good one. So make sure you guys are there too for that one.
Yep,
All right.
thank you. And I have a houseplants class on Saturday morning at 10. If anybody wants to join in, you can find that on our Eventbrite page too. So thank you.
All right. Bye, guys. Thank you for coming.